idea that a small group of industries are benefiting from conflicts around the world is an idea who's come to be accepted. It's the military industrial complex that makes all the billions. It's they who make the profits. So future generations do pay, whether financially or otherwise, for the conflicts that affect current generations. I think it's important to understand for countries that often these conflicts are encouraged or sustained because of technologies being available and countries wanting to test those technologies.
What is a military industrial complex? How does it operate? And what led to its foundation across the world? And how influential it is as an industry in today's day and age?
Well, the term military industrial complex is something we owe to President Dwight Eisenhower, the President of the United States after the Second World War. Eisenhower warned his own people that a large conglomerate of industries, private sector industries, had come to become extremely influential in American politics, funding American politicians after the Second World War to sustain their own business. I think over the years we have seen, particularly after the Vietnam War, we have seen large numbers of wars around the world where the suppliers are limited. I mean, if you look at the structure of the global defense industry, the suppliers are essentially the United States, Russia, European Union, to a smaller extent, Israel, Japan, and now more recently China. But the users are countries across the world in Latin America, in Africa, in Asia. So the idea that a small group of industries are benefiting from conflicts around the world is an idea who's come to be accepted. And I think in the Indian context, particularly in the recent conflict, what I was driving attention to is the fact that now we have a new entrant in the defense business, which is China. One of the things that about the India-Pakistan conflict was the use of Chinese aircraft, jets, and Chinese missiles. This is the first time that China has had an opportunity to display its own technology.
Sure. Now, let me come to the other part of the equation. Considering the size of the defense industry, like you likely said, it's very centered. There are few power structures. Now, with billions of dollars into play almost every month, in the age of AI and cyber warfare, how influential is this lobby in prolonging a conflict and more so creating conflicts in the first place in today's world, according to you?
When countries come into conflict, they are looking for the best technology, and the suppliers of that technology are out there to sell. So, the whole concept of a military industrial complex is that there are these suppliers who are constantly looking for markets. I mean, this is like any other commodity. I mean, if you're a supplier of, let's say, wheat or sugar or an automobile or a soap or a shampoo, you're constantly looking for markets. So the suppliers of destructive technologies are also looking for markets. And those markets are created by conflict between countries. I think it's important to understand for countries that often these conflicts are encouraged or sustained because of technologies being available and countries wanting to test those technologies. You know, last 20 years, China has been developing sophisticated technology, but China did not get an opportunity to test its technology. When it tried to help Russia in the war in Ukraine, the Americans warned China that if it supplied any technology to Russia, then it would sanction China. And because of the business links between China and the United States, the Chinese were very careful in what technology they made available to the Russians. But in the case of Pakistan, they didn't have that inhibition. Pakistan is a military ally. And so they tested some of their weapons. Now, whether they succeeded or not is not the issue. The issue is that you need to test a product before you decide whether it's successful or not. And this war was useful in testing those products.
Supplying arms is one part of the equation. The other is having the money to buy defense equipments, to buy essential defense commodities. And here, debt comes into picture. Most of the small countries which are at war, I mean, according to Geneva Institute, there are more than 120 armed conflicts going on around the world right now as we speak, small and large. Now, most of these conflicts are in countries which are poor. They don't have money to buy defense arms and ammunitions. My question is, how can they afford a debt? What is the strategic play out behind the scenes so that they can negotiate more arms for the wars, for the rebellions, and I would even include drug lords and mafias. They end up with the most modern, sophisticated weapons. What is the
Well,
back channel dealing which happens goes through?
well, I mean, I think now there are variety of ways in which countries or non-state actors fund acquisition of weaponry. We have now a lot of evidence to show, for example, as you correctly mentioned, the use of drug money. Incidentally, the use of drug money is an old methodology used. The British used opium in order to sell to China to fund their conquest of China. So that's going back more than 100 years. So the use of drug money to fund acquisition of weaponry and thereby conduct military campaigns is an old methodology, and we see that being done across the world. I think what we also see is the use of organized funding. For example, in the same week that Pakistan was engaged in a conflict with India, the International Monetary Fund sanctioned over $1 billion of loan to Pakistan. Now that's an assurance being given to Pakistan, and when the International Monetary Fund gives money to a country, it's also a signal to the markets, to financial institutions, to international banks that here is a sovereign that is credit worthy, that we are giving money to them. So in case they come to you for borrowing, you should have no problem. Now, these are all signals that are given through the financial system to different institutions in order to fund countries that are looking for money in order to do a variety of things, including acquiring armaments. I mean, acquiring armaments is one of the things that Pakistan would do with the money it gets. It's not the only thing, but certainly it's an important way of spending whatever money it gets.
Sure. My last question, Mr. Baru, would be on who who eventually pays for this debt. I mean, citizens of the country, the future generation who have been embroiled in debt. I mean, an average Pakistani owes a lot of money to International Monetary Fund. The irony is that the common citizens do not understand the debt mechanism. They are high on emotions. So, can you please explain to our audience who eventually pays for this huge pile of debt?
It's the future generations that pay not only for the debt but for all the consequences of conflict. United States dropped a nuclear bomb on Japan. Who paid for it? Future generations of Japan paid for it, right? So future generations do pay, whether financially or otherwise, for the conflicts that affect current generations, which is why there's a responsibility on the current leadership of all countries to be far-sighted enough to avoid conflict, to avoid spending money on war or on armaments, which are, like Keynes said, digging holes and filling them up. It's not productive investment. It's the military-industrial complex that makes all the billions. It's they who make the profits. As I said in that article that you mentioned, in peacetime, investments are made in weaponry. In wartime, profits are made from the sale of that weapon, from the use of that weapon.